UFC Paris betting and DraftKings show. We got 12 fights this Saturday, noon start time. I'm Jon Kelly. Let's hear the picks. First fight up is going to be Stephanie Edgar coming in as a sizable favorite, minus 260 on short notice. The comeback on UFC debutante Aileen Perez is plus 220. And this is just a spot where I'm basically never picking a massive favorite at the lower levels of WMMA ever again. And this is one where I think Edgar is more skilled than Perez. You know, she comes from a high-level judo background. She's a pretty decent submission grappler as well. But against Perez, who is probably going to be the more aggressive fighter of the two, who should have a striking advantage. She has 4 wins by knockout. She's a 7-1 prospect, but she's faced very low levels of competition. So even though she has those 4 knockouts, a lot of it was against, you know, soccer moms on the regional scene. So I don't know if she'll be able to get Edgar out of there per se, but I do think she could probably make this fight play out closer than these odds suggest. You know, she's not a bad grappler herself. We've seen her show the ability to land takedowns as well. I just question whether that's going to be an angle here against Edgar, who I think is probably just the better grappler. But does she deserve to be minus 260? Probably not. This is a fight I'm not going to put my money on. If I were, I'd maybe take a small stab on the underdog. I know she's barking at a few people in MMA Twitter, which is pretty funny, which makes me kind of want to root for her a little bit. She's got a little bit of dog in her, some might say. So I like that Aileen Perez is coming to bring the fight. So maybe I'll have some shares of her on DraftKings. I'm not going to pay for Edgar at that price, especially coming off the weak performance against Mayra Bueno Silva in the controversial tap or no tap fight just a few weeks ago. So it's going to be a pass for me overall. Maybe a little bit of interest on the dog side on DraftKings, but that's it in the first fight. Next fight up, we have Khalid Taha coming in as a small favorite at minus 115. The comeback on UFC debutante fighter Christian Quinones is minus 105. And this is a spot where I'm very excited for the Taha side. I think we're getting a buy low spot on Khalid Taha. He's faced pretty stiff competition, but one thing they all had in common was they were pretty decent grapplers, or they were primarily guys that want to take things to the mat, grind on you quite a bit. And that's what happened. You know, when Taha has been able to be at space and be able to swing his heavy, powerful hands, like that's where he has real upside. It's just the fact that you get this guy down, you grind on him, you can control him on the mat and really neutralize him. I just don't think this is a spot where that's going to happen. He's finally getting a guy who's primarily a striker in Quinones. He fought on Dana White Contender Series last season. He won a decision victory, looked okay in that fight, did land a knockdown. He's got some solid striking, strong jab, good footwork, likes to stay on the outside, mix in the calf kicks as well. I just think more times than not, Taha is going to be able to cut off the cage, start walking Quinones down, and Quinones, I think, could be baited into a brawl. This guy, despite having a few recent decision fights, primarily over the course of his career, he was a kill or be killed style of fighter. So I don't think it's going to take much for Taha to get that brawl out of Quinones, that brawl that he wants, where he's able to be the one with more power, swinging for the fences. So I like the knockout upside for Taha on DraftKings. I bet Taha by knockout at plus 420 on FanDuel. I bet him by first round knockout on FanDuel at 10-1. I just think it's a big number for a guy who we know is going to move forward, and he's very, very powerful. This guy has clear knockout upside. If he's able to connect clean against Quinones, I think he could put him out of there. So in terms of DraftKings, I like the Taha side. I know there's been a bunch of market love for Quinones. The line has moved like 50 cents in his favor, but I just think it's a spot where we're finally getting Taha in a reasonable matchup. I think we can buy low here. Next fight up, we have Benoit Saint Denis coming in as a minus 285 favorite. The comeback on Gabriel Miranda is plus 245. I really favor the Saint Denis side. I just think he basically has Miranda covered everywhere. Saint Denis is primarily a grappler. He had a ton of submission victories coming into the UFC. He fought Eliza Dos Santos on short notice and basically got killed in that fight. He's very, very durable. And then we've seen him bounce back recently against Nicholas Stoltzfus, submitted him in the second round. I think he's pretty well-rounded. He's fighting in front of his home crowd. He comes from like a French Special Forces background, so this card is in Paris. So I think he's going to have the crowd behind him as well. and he's really just getting a softball matchup against Gabriel Miranda. This guy is basically just like a noodly guard player, has a super padded record, hasn't fought really anybody on the regional scene, and almost all of his wins have come by early submission. So he's willing to flop to his back. He's willing to fight off his back, which I just don't like in general. But maybe if you have, you know, the tricky grappling upside against somebody, then okay, I'll take a shot on you. I just don't think he's going to have that here against Saint Denis, who's a pretty decent grappler in his own right, who I think is going to be spending most of the time in dominant position. I think he could stay safe here. And the last thing I'll say, I just think there's going to be an overall strength advantage. Miranda has fought most of his career at 145. He's moving up to fight Saint Denis, who actually fought his short notice at 170. So I think Saint Denis is going to be bigger, he's going to be stronger, and I think he's just a more talented fighter. I think he finds a finish here on the mat. So give me Saint Denis by TKO is the official pick, and he's a solid DraftKings target as well this week. Next fight up, we have Nasser Emmava, minus 255 favorite with Joaquin Buckley on the comeback at plus 215. And this is one where Emmava, I just think, kind of has Buckley covered here. Skill for skill, I think he's a better striker. I think he's a better grappler as well. You know, Buckley obviously has the fight-changing style of power. You know, most of his wins are coming by knockout. That's primarily how he wins fights, and maybe he can mix in some wrestling here and there in the right spots. I just don't think this is going to be one of those spots. Emmava is a pretty decent grappler in his own right. You know, at times, people have been able to take him down and control him, but those were pretty decent grapplers. I just don't think Buckley's on that level, so I'd be surprised if he had really any success trying to take things to the ground here. And on the feet, outside of him landing a big power shot, I just think he's outskilled here. So I'm going to lean with Emmava, who I think is just the better technical striker and has the better durability as well. We're going to say Emmava by decision, but overall, I just think there's better targets this week on DraftKings. Next fight up in the lightweight division, we have Michael Figlak coming in as a minus 195 favorite with Fair Ziam on the comeback at plus 165. And Figlak is a guy that I'm pretty impressed with. He's been a pretty solid prospect over in Cage Warriors. It was only a matter of time before the UFC was going to give him the call, and it seems like this could potentially be a setup fight for him going up against Fair Ziam, who is basically just a one-dimensional kickboxer. And even with the credentialed kickboxing background, we just really haven't seen much to be impressed with in Ziam, even in terms of the striking. He's got a very technical jab, decent footwork, but he's just super low volume and doesn't seem to have the power to really hurt guys. And when you factor that in, where he doesn't have much in terms of defensive grappling, you start to see there's really ways to take advantage of him. And I think this is another one of those style of matchup, because Figlak, I expect him to be the more aggressive striker of the two, a little bit more reckless, sharp counter strikers with power, I think, can make this kid pay. I just don't think Ziam is that guy. But also, Figlak has shown the ability to land takedowns. He doesn't have a win by submission, but the guy is actually a pretty decent grappler. He's shown some powerful double leg takedowns on the regional scene. I think that could be a path to victory for him here against Ziam, who can't defend takedowns very well. And when he is put on his back, he really just doesn't know what to do at times. So I like Figlak here. I know it's a steep price tag to pay for a debutant fighter, but I think the favorite price tag is somewhat warranted. In terms of DraftKings, this one kind of has a wide range of outcomes. It really just depends on what Figlak is going to look like in his debut here. I think I'll have, a fair share of him on DraftKings, but I'm not going to go crazy. He's definitely not a core play for me, because I do think this one probably goes the full 15 minutes. And next up, we have another fighter making his UFC debut and coming in with a lot of market respect as Abus Magomedov, a minus 275 favorite, takes on Dustin Stoltzfus on the comeback at plus 230. And Magomedov, I think, is decent. I do think it's a little bit too much respect for him. He does have some power on the feet, is a little bit of reckless at times, can go for takedowns. He's shown some powerful takedowns. He previously fought in PFL a couple years back, most recently had a finish over in KSW. He seems to be a pretty decent fighter, but I also think there's holes in his game, and as he starts to face better competition, I think those holes are going to be exposed. It's just that I don't think Stoltzfus is that guy, and I cashed a ticket on Stoltzfus as an underdog against Dwight Grant his last time out, and it's like, even winning that bet, I'm like, why did I put money on this guy? He just tries so hard to give fights away. He doesn't have much in the striking. He's more of a leg kicker, doesn't have real power, definitely wants to be grappling. And if he's unable to land takedowns or have much success with the grappling, there is just no plan B. On the feet, he's lost. He can't do anything on the mat if he's not in dominant positions. His cardio doesn't look great. He's been finished in the third round multiple times. So I think Magomedov should win this fight as the better striker, the more powerful of the two. And in the grappling, I think he'll be able to neutralize Stoltzfus and do enough to get his hand raised. So I'm going to pick Magomedov here, but I think in the future, this guy is definitely one where I'm going to look nice and hard at the opponent and see if we could get a potential fade spot against him. Up next, our feature bout on the prelims as Charles Jourdain, a -140 favorite, takes on Nathaniel Wood on the comeback at +120. And this is a fight that I'm probably the most excited for on the card. I think this one is going to be absolute fireworks from the moment that it starts. And I know there's been a lot of market love on the Charles Jourdain side. I like my guy Nathaniel Wood here. I think it's going to be a fun fight. I think it's going to be competitive, but I am not looking to fade Nathaniel Wood at a juice price tag, especially considering how well he looked against Charles Rosa just a couple months ago. This guy's a very dangerous striker, strong jab, heavy leg kicks as well. We saw him almost finish Charles Rosa with those leg kicks. I just think he's very well-rounded. We've seen him early on in the UFC go to his grappling. He averages over 1 takedown per 15 minutes, has a few submission victories as well. So it's like in this fight against Jourdain, who is a great striker, but he's a little bit one-dimensional, I think it's just going to be very competitive on the feet. You know, Jourdain, one of his biggest advantages is he can pour on that volume for 15 minutes when his opponents can't really keep up that pace. Nathaniel Wood is going to match that pace. Statistically speaking, he lands more per minute than Charles Jourdain does, and we know he has great cardio as well. I think moving back to 145 is going to help the durability, and that was really the concern earlier on in his career, but I think a lot of that was attributed to the tough weight cut to make 135. So I think he looked great his last time out. I think he's going to look great here. I just give me the guy who I think is going to be very competitive in the striking, and I think has the wrestling and the grappling upside in Nathaniel Wood. At a dog price, absolutely. I haven't bet him yet, but I'm definitely looking to get involved. But this is a fun fight. I'm going to have exposure to both sides on DraftKings, but the pick is Wood by decision. Kicking off the main card, we have William Gomez coming in as a -215 favorite. The comeback on Yarno Aarons is +185. And this is one where I'd never heard of either of these guys coming into this fight. Gomez is a local guy in France, does have a decent record. He's kind of like the budget version of Ode Osborne in the featherweight division, I'd say, just because of the style that he fights with. You know, his striking's okay. He can be explosive at times. You know, he has some powerful leg kicks, some decent boxing, but the dude defensively, I think, is kind of a loose cannon. He also tries like this no-look head kick that he's looked for like multiple times across his regional tape, which I think is very foolish, and I think a good striker is probably going to make him pay for doing that. But I just don't know if Yarno Aarons is the guy. This guy's fought very low level of competition. Does seem to be the more aggressive of the two. You know, he'll look for flying knees, explosive level takedowns. Okay submission grappler as well, but it's actually been Gomez who I think has the better wrestling on tape. He's got some powerful takedowns. I think he's probably the more likely of the two to land takedowns, but does he deserve this -215 price tag? I'm not convinced he does. So, I mean, I guess I understand why people are taking the shot on the dog here at a pretty big price tag in what should just be maybe a competitive low-level fight. I'm either going to pass or maybe take a small poke on the dog. I could definitely see Gomez being able to maybe land a couple takedowns here and Aarons maybe gassing out as the fight goes on, but it's not a read that I'm very confident in, just because I think we have a lot of questions really on both sides. And up next, we have Nasser Perez coming in as a sizable favorite at -230. The comeback on the veteran, the pit bull, John Makdessi, is +195. And I like John Makdessi here. I bet John Makdessi for a unit at +198 yesterday. I think Makdessi, I think I could just see this fight playing out similarly to the Bahamondes fight, Makdessi's last time out, where it's like, yes, he's older, he's 37 years old, but people just want to completely write him off. The dude still has skills. Of course, there's obvious concern with the durability. As you age, you get a little bit slower, can't take the punches as well. And Perez does have a little bit of power, fights out of the southpaw stance, has a heavy left hand, but we've seen him get exposed in the past. He's just a one-dimensional boxer. You figure this guy out, and you could take advantage of it. We saw it in the Bobby Green fight. We saw Dan Hooker just completely out-wrestle this guy. I think there's multiple ways that Makdessi is going to be live here in the +200 range. Like, you give me a guy who's a good striker, who fights with a high fight IQ, going up against a one-dimensional boxer. I'm not expecting either guy to grapple here. I have to think this fight plays out very competitively, and I think it will. So give me McDessie in the plus 200 range. I think he's a live underdog on DraftKings. I don't think he has much of a ceiling, because it's like, if he wins, okay, sure, he might score like 70, 75 points, but you pretty much need like the other underdogs not to come through on this card. And yes, that's possible. I just don't know if it's very likely for this card. So I'll have some McDessie, but he's not like a smash underdog play, even though I am picking him to win. I just think the ceiling's a little bit limited. Which brings us to our next fight, as Alessio Di Chirico comes in as minus 115, slight favorite, with Roman Kopylov on the comeback at minus 105. And I just don't really want any part of this from a betting standpoint. I don't trust either of these guys. I think they're super untrustworthy. Di Chirico has won just one fight over his last 5 fights. He's coming off a first-round knockout loss to Al Hassan his last time out. He knocked out Joaquin Buckley prior to that, and then was previously on a 3-fight losing streak. So he's coming into this one, though, which should be a favorable matchup against him. He doesn't put a ton of volume out there. He's an okay striker, can mix in the takedowns, averages 1.62 takedowns per 15 minutes. But we've seen over his last 4 fights, he hasn't landed a single takedown. That was more over early on in his career, and part of that is because his last 2 fights ended inside the first round. It's just concerning a little bit, because against Kopylov, who does have power, this is a guy who is 8-0 coming into the UFC, a ton of wins by knockout. We know he has that power. Dropped Albert Jurayev in that fight his last time out. So we know the power's there. It's just like, this guy doesn't have much other substance to his game, doesn't put a ton of volume out there. Decent takedown defense, but he just seems very limited, and it's hard to bet on those guys. So I think Di Chirico, skill for skill, this is his fight to lose. I just don't trust him not to lose it. So that's why I'm not betting him here. I think Kopylov probably has more upside on DraftKings, because if either guy's going to win by knockout, I think it's probably him. So I'll lean Kopylov on DraftKings, but the pick is going to be Di Chirico. Again, it's just not one that I want to be too heavily invested this week. Up next in the co-main event, we have Robert Whittaker, a minus 210 favorite, with Marvin Vettori on the comeback at plus 190. And I like the Vettori side here, not because I think he's a better fighter than Robert Whittaker, but if you're going to give me plus 190, which is just about the same price that he was against Israel Adesanya, I think that's objectively just wrong. You know, Robert Whittaker was a similar price tag to Izzy as well. It's like, how can you put Whittaker being as big of a favorite as Izzy was to Vettori? I just don't think that's accurate based on how this fight's going to play out. I think in the striking, Whittaker's certainly better. He's going to be dancing around the outside. He's got better footwork. He's going to be having success with that jab, and that's really how people have been able to beat Vettori, is with the jab, just being a lot quicker. We've seen Adesanya just repeatedly punch him like a punching bag, because Vettori's just a step behind in terms of the striking, but he is going to make the striking competitive. He's going to be the one moving forward. He pushes a decent pace as well. He might be able to just grind on Whittaker if he can get him against the cage and just wear on him a little bit. I think if either guy's going to be able to have grappling success, I think it probably is Vettori, but I'm kind of expecting neither guy to be able to have that success. So I think we just have a competitive kickboxing match for 15 minutes, and we've seen the durability come into question on the Whittaker side in the past. You know, he is getting older. He's been through a lot more wars than Vettori has. Vettori is historically very durable. Isn't really known as a knockout guy, but again, we've seen Whittaker hurt multiple times. All we need for Vettori to be live here is Whittaker to just not be on his A game for this price tag not to look accurate. So give me Vettori. I just think it's going to play out much closer than the public seems to think. I think you're getting a bit of a tax on Whittaker for the name value, and I think Vettori's got that dog in him to make this a close fight. So give me Marvin Vettori. I haven't bet him yet, but I am going to be betting him before the end of the week in the plus 190 range. Which brings us to our main event in the heavyweight division. Ciryl Gane is a massive favorite, biggest favorite on the card at minus 520. The comeback on Tai Tuivasa is plus 410. And obviously, I'm going to be rooting for Tai Tuivasa because I'm not a psychopath. I think anybody that doesn't want to see him win and do a shoey should probably just stop watching the sport. But realistically, I think Ciryl Gane just has him covered everywhere. It's just a question of, how does Ciryl Gane win this fight? Is he going to play the safe, stay at range, outpoint this guy for 25 minutes if he needs to? Is he going to come out more aggressively with a chip on his shoulder because of that title shot loss to Francis Ngannou his last time out, and maybe look for a finish more so than he has, take a little bit more risk than he has in the past? Or is he going to go to the ground game where he should have a clear advantage? You know, his submission prop opened up at plus 650 on FanDuel earlier in the week. It's been bet down a little bit, but I think that's worth a decent little poke here, just because it's like, yeah, maybe he doesn't grapple at all, but if he does decide to implement the ground game, he should have a clear grappling advantage against Tai Tuivasa. And on the Tuivasa side, it's very obvious what he needs to do. He needs to not be scared of the power of Ciryl Gane. Too many guys that have fought him, like Rosenstruck and some of these other powerful strikers in the past, just gave him too much respect. They didn't take any chances, so they just got stuck at range in what was a pretty boring fight. The good thing is I don't think Tuivasa knows how to fight like that, and I don't think he will. I think he's going to force the power and the aggressiveness out of Gane here by moving forward and just swinging heavy. So I think he probably gets finished doing that, but I think he's going to give himself a puncher's chance. So I'm not going to fade him completely on DraftKings, but I do think Gane wins. I think Gane gets a finish, and this is a strong target on DraftKings as well. And as always, guys, fightnumbers.com will have my DraftKings player rankings broken down by salary tier. It'll have ownership projections as well, line movement, fantasy points per minute. It's all completely free, fightnumbers.com. Check that out. If you didn't already, like the video, drop me a subscribe as I continue to bring you more UFC content each and every week. Noon start time on Saturday. Don't forget, we got mimosas on deck, the best bets roundtable Saturday morning to get you prepared, leading right up into the card. I'm super excited. Best of luck, and we'll see you guys next time.